Hello everybody and welcome to my new video. Today we are going to talk about Imbolc and the history behind Imbolc, what Imbolc means, as well as the deity associated with it, and how the deity in Irish mythology may have been male originally. So we're going to look into the female aspect of Bridget, and then we're going to look into the aspect of Britannia, and then we're going to look into other aspects such as Gaulish mythology and Lustrian mythology of Portugal and more. For those who don't know, I am writing a book. It's called Celtic Mythology Explained. And basically it's going to take all aspects from Celtic mythology in one book, as well as the influence that came from Roman and Greek mythology, as well as the oldest scripts from Hinduism that intertwines with Celtic mythology. All the deities and their associations you could also find too in the Hindu text. So we're going from a time of the Indo-European migration and earlier to when the first tales were written and taught. And now with that said, Celtic mythology. So what is Celtic mythology? Celtic mythology comes in different spectrums. So there's Welsh mythology, Irish mythology, Lustrian mythology, Basque mythology, Gaulish mythology, Iberian mythology. So as you can see, the term Celtic and Irish mythology are not the same thing. Irish mythology is a form of Celtic mythology or Celticy. But however, Irish mythology is Irish mythology as a whole. Celtic mythology as a whole would be taking the stories in the perspective of each version of Celtic mythology and adding them into one, explaining Celtic mythology with the things that have changed over time with the things that would most likely be from the Iron Age time period of how it was taught, how they were worshipped, and how the stories were told. With that said, we're going to look at Bridget from Irish mythology. Common stories of the fire, energy, and healing deity known as Bridget, whom is the daughter of the Dodka. Now this is a story of oral tradition found in Ireland, where there's a story where there was a human who was named after the goddess Bridget, and this person who was named after Bridget and even resembled Bridget wanted to join the church. And basically during that time they didn't have the funding, and ends up with their own church. And that could be the inspiration for Saint Bridget. There's stories about how the goddess Bridget turned into Christianity in order to convert the early Irish. So you see, Bridget and Saint Bridget are often simultaneously talked about with one another. And that's from the Christian Irish standpoint. A lot of things that we now know nowadays of Irish mythology was written around a time period where there was a lot of influence from the church. Now, how we look at what was from the church and what wasn't would be from other types of myths from other Celtic peoples that was documented, what they taught and passed down, as well as Hinduism, which I said before, which has a bunch of different forms. Hinduism, Hindu mythology follows Celtic mythology. A lot of the stories is to a T, and that's comparing the Irish mythology with the Iberian, with the Gaulish, with some Welsh, with the Hindu text. There have been other scholars and historians too that did say that Celtic myth is pretty much Hindu mythology. There's a lot of references to Hindu myth. I dropped my phone. There's a lot of references in Celtic mythology to Hindu myth. And that includes the Triskel, which you can see on my Baldwin right there. So there's multiple Irish stories regarding Bridget. One of them would be she was born on the 1st of spring, and her dad was a priest, which is different than her dad being the Dadka, which would indicate she was human. Her dad was a priest who wanted her to be married to an English man, but she refused to get married to who her father wanted her to marry. And she has red hair just like the Irish version of the goddess, or the deity, or the being. That this goddess or this being is what's the word? Is this goddess or this being is inspired from. And anyway, when she went to try to set up her own monastery or church from the landowner was selfish and did not let her have the land. So then her cloak that she wore, she prayed to a higher power, which from a Christianity standpoint, you could say would be God, or the Lord, or Yahweh. Or from a historical standpoint, like me, who studies multiple religions across the globe, not only will you say Yahweh, you might even say maybe Baal as a name too, or you would say Baal too. So Yahweh and Baal, etc. Anyway, she prayed to a higher power, and her robe or her cloak, it expanded and it covered that part of the land. So that way, the landowner had to give up that land to Bridget for her to have her church and monastery. And no such stories I just mentioned comes from a Seamus, who's a native of Ireland. I don't really know how to pronounce his last name. I'm learning Gaelic, but I'm not the most fluent at Gaelic, considering that I'm from here in America. And there's a Shannon Patterson as well. So these are oral myths that's coming from Ireland by Ireland natives. And I'm also going to turn to Anthony Murphy of Mythical Ireland. Anthony Murphy also expresses it varies on the different stories, whether who you're talking to, if it's going to be a Catholic audience, or what you may refer to as an Irish Reconstructionist audience, where he does talk about how there is a version of Bridget where she's human, and she died around 400 and something. I will put that video in the link description, and then he also brings up how she's the daughter of the Dadka. Now, with that said, in his video, and how when in my Samhain video I talked about all the different deities that are associated with Samhain, and one of them was Kashyapa. Kashyapa would be the Hindu parallel to that of the Dadka, Sakalis, Aranos, Sugar, if I'm pronouncing that right in Basque mythology, that is my bad. That is Sugaar. Sugar. something like that. And I don't mean I don't mean cane sugar. So anyway, there's those. Don't know if I'm saying the name right. The Iberian deity, I think it was Ortono, something like that. Anyway, and he was the husband of a goddess that resembles Danu. Her name was Nabia. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's Iberian mythology. Anyway, basically what tied Kashyapa with the Dadka is not only the association with Danu, but also had to do with the fact that Kashyapa also has a staff or a cane like the Dadka, and as well as Kashyapa fought off a monster and separated the lands and made landmass out of the monster, which you can hear the story in the Irish Maha story. So, well, that story, not only can you hear it in Ireland, you could also hear in Basque mythology too, with sugar and the hen sugar. So, the thing is with Kashyapa, right, in Hindu myth, Kashyapa, he didn't have a daughter that had to do with fire, healing, or energy. But there is forms of Hinduism where he had a son who was of fire, energy, and healing. His name was Agni, which then leads into Gaulish mythology. So now we have Galanos, and Galanos is associated with fire, energy, and hot springs, insinuating healing. Now we're going to look into one of my other favorite historians who has a degree. He's made videos on some things out of Basque. He made videos on stuff in Portugal that was Celtic, and other types of different lore, mythologies, old writing, archaeology. Now, where I got the information on Indovius of Portugal comes from somebody with a degree who is a historian known as Arith Harger. Now we're going to look into the different pronouns that I find in my own research on what the name most likely would have been in Ireland. Both, by the way, do sound like Bridget, but not. Though most, when they think about Bridget, they think her name means the exalted one. Now, according to the other types of mythologies that are Celtic, such as Gaulish mythology, Lucian mythology, Iberian mythology, and so forth, the name would not mean exalted one. It would have to do with something with fire, or it would have to do with something that is burning. With that said, there's one of the words in Irish Gaelic is Bree, and Bree is spelled B-R-U-I-T-H. Bree. Which sounds a lot like Bridget. Then there's one that I believe is pronounced Bracal, if I remember correctly, and that has to do with fire. Which, by the way, all these findings would also be written in my book. There's also a Welsh word too that looks a lot like Agni, which means ignite, which is another historian from Scotland who has a degree. And he talked about how there's words over in what we refer to as the UK. In their languages, in their native languages, that resembles to ignite. So, there's that too, which would indicate that the deity would have been worshipped over there. And even though the god Agni is not associated with the swastika oftenly, it is possible he could have been. Because the swastika was basically used for gods and deities that were associated with healing and purifying. The symbol the symbol of the swastika originally means something that is pure or to purify. And there's other Hindu deities associated with the symbol. So it is possible why they would have associated the other gods with that symbol. Also, there's a form of that symbol that a lot of people know as Bridget's cross, which has 3 endings, and then there's one as 4 endings, which leads into the meaning of the triskel, which, well, I have on my neck right here. So, it could represent the afterlife, right? It would be reincarnation, the in-between, in the other world. 4, if you read my blogs, as well as Anthony Murphy's information, which, by the way, is a great historian at Ireland who is very renowned in the field. And when he talks about the quadruple spirals at Newgrange and how it has to do with the solstices and equinoxes, that is what could also represent that symbol that was adopted in Ireland. So in a sense, with solstices and equinox, you could say change of seasons, which makes sense because Bridget and is associated with the spring, right? According to what the church written down in the medieval scripts. That could also go for the same for the male counterparts found in what was ancient Gaul, as well as the Iberian Peninsula and Portugal. So now we're going to look at a god and a deity known as Imbolc or Envelicosis. Envelicosis was a god of fire and healing. He was worshipped by the Lustians or the Lustianos of Portugal. And during the formation of Christianity into Spain, Iberia Peninsula, the Iberian Peninsula in Portugal, they refer to this deity as being somewhat similar to Lucifer or Satan, because it's a male and associated with fire. So they affiliated him with Satan. And so the once worshipped Indolvical or Indolvius, I probably pronounced that wrong there. I said it correctly the first times. Anyway, his worship was not as renowned after that. But still to this day, there are people who do worship him in Portugal, and they leave him offerings, such as ribbons on trees, or even something that looks like a stack of weaves weaved together. Not like Bridget's cloth, but more of, you know what a haystack looks like? So it's basically the same type of material, right? But it's like held together like this, with like, something tying it together. Which you'll see in the video description under this video. You'll be able to see that offering sitting down on the ground by a tree. Which, that could possibly be the inspiration for Bridget's cross in Ireland, as well as the swastika, which, by the way, is not just a German thing. It's older than the Nazis. It's even older than Hinduism, where it was more... It's more renowned in Hinduism and in Buddhism, but it's even older than that. It's one of the world's oldest symbols. And And Brigid's cross symbol, if that's what you want to refer it to, or Brigid's symbol, or the symbol of the fire and energy deity, or the symbol of the fire and energy deity. Considering there's a possibility that this deity was not originally female. So, in Gaulish mythology, like I said, there's Galanos. In Portugal mythology, there's Imbolc. And in Iberian mythology, there's Endorvius. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But that one looks more similar to the name of Agni. Agni's other name is Agni Lodka in Hinduism. You can also see similar words to these deities in the Welsh language, as well as Old Latin, and even in Irish Gaelic, which may insinuate that Brigid was made from a later time period, or Britannia. Now, Britannia, which is most likely who Brigid is, based upon, or after, based after, is a goddess who isn't just Celtic but Romanized. It's a Gallo-Roman goddess who's based off of Roman deities in Roman Britain. With that said, that would mean Brigid in Britannia wasn't a Celtic invention. It was a Gallo-Roman invention. And the Gales, they originally came from Galicia, Spain, which you'll see in one of my other videos. The Gales originally were the Galicians, right? Iberians. With that said, there isn't a female goddess like Brigid over there. So that would have been adopted to their customs over time. Now, I can't say for sure if it's when the Britons and the early Gaels of Ireland ended up first exchanging, or it would be during the time of Saxony, or maybe even the times of St. Patrick. An exact time period you can't really say of how the deity changed, other than it was not a female deity. So, what would be this figure's name if not Brigid or Britannia? So yeah, I'm wearing this because it is a new day. It is Imbolc. So yeah, it would either be Brakel or Brie in Irish Gaelic. I'm not sure what it would be in the Britannic languages, other than the Welsh equivalent, which I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right because I haven't really tried to practice learning Welsh yet. Now, Imbolc too, it could be seen as a fertility holiday, and also you would expect to have fires and feasts and wines, and as well as having that symbol known as Brigid's cross hung up, or like I would call it, the fire deity symbol, or basically it's the Celtic swastika symbol, which means purified, or something to do with purity, something to do with peace. Worship of Britannia and Britain can date from around the time period of 43 AD. And that concludes my video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you're interested in scholarly work and historian work. And I hope you're interested in my book, and you come back to this channel and like my content. Fiskar va agus tapalat. Bye.